Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving into, well, the absolute bedrock of getting things done. Projects.
Right. And a project at its most basic is just a set of interconnected tasks. They're aimed at delivering specific outcomes.
Simple enough on the surface.
But as the sources make clear, it's never just tasks, is it? You're constantly wrestling with constraints like cost, schedule, performance, and you're always navigating inherent risks. It's quite a balancing act.
And this isn't just niche knowledge for folks with project manager in their title, right?
Oh, definitely not.
Our source material really highlights how valuable understanding projects is, well, across the board. Think about accounting professionals, for instance.
Good example.
They could be the high-level sponsor, or maybe managing the budget day-to-day within the project, or even providing specialist advice.
Exactly. So knowing the fundamentals is powerful regardless of, where you fit in.
It helps you understand the why behind the processes and how your piece contributes to the whole picture.
Absolutely, which is why our mission for this deep dive is to jump straight into the beginning, the initiation phase.
Right, where it all starts.
We're going to pull directly from the source material you've provided to explore the foundational elements, 2 crucial documents, and the key roles that make it all happen.
We're essentially exploring the essential why and what that has to be nailed down before any serious work can even begin.
You got it.
So if you're just starting to think about a project, what's the very first thing the source says you absolutely need? Like step 1.
Before anything else, before any real work starts, you need a strong business case.
Okay.
It's the document that provides the fundamental justification, the reason for the project to exist. Without it, you're kind of building on sand.
Makes sense. And a good business case isn't just a single statement, is it? It's built from several key components. Where does it start?
Yeah, it's got layers. It starts with the current situation, what prompted this whole thing.
Okay, the context.
Exactly. You need to evaluate the situation that created the need. That means looking both internally and externally to clearly identify the problem the project is supposed to solve. The source gives that pretty compelling example of a manufacturing organization facing crippling supply chain issues for a critical component.
Right, I remember that.
If they don't fix it, they can't meet client demand, and that could really damage key relationships. That problem, that pain point, that's the fertile ground for a project.
Okay, so you've identified the problem, the pain point.
Yeah.
But you don't just land on one solution out of thin air.
No, not in a robust business case. The next element is options considered and chosen.
Options, plural.
Right. You explore alternative ways the problem could be tackled. And this is key. You have to clearly justify why the specific option you're proposing is the best fit for the current situation.
And how do you justify it?
Well, you have to consider if it's both possible and acceptable.
Okay, so feasibility and acceptability. Like in our manufacturing example, maybe they thought about finding new suppliers.
Or forming strategic partnerships, yeah. Or maybe building their own in-house production extension.
Right.
The business case has to make the argument for why building in-house in that specific scenario is the chosen path over the others. It spells out the reasoning.
Okay, and part of justifying that chosen option is assessing its feasibility. Can we actually pull this off?
Exactly. That's the question. This looks at whether the resources, both physical, like facilities and equipment, and human, meaning the people and their skills are genuinely available.
So for the manufacturing company, building in-house demands analyzing if they have the physical space for the extension and access to the skilled labor needed to run a new production line. It has to be practically possible.
Precisely. It has to be doable. But the source also mentions it has to be acceptable. Acceptable to whom?
Good question. Who needs to find it acceptable?
Primarily the key stakeholders, especially the business owners or shareholders.
Okay. The people holding the purse strings or setting the strategy.
Right. This is where the financial assessment, the investment appraisal becomes critical. You're looking at the high-level costs versus the expected benefits.
To see if it makes financial sense.
Yeah, basically, is it likely to deliver a positive return? Is it worth the investment?
And I thought it was interesting that the source points out a common challenge here. The financial benefits often only materialize after the project is fully completed and embedded into the business operations.
That's a really important nuance. It takes time. In the manufacturing case, they're incurring significant costs up front, building the extensions, setting up equipment.
Big initial outlay.
For sure. The actual financial upside from producing the component internally only starts contributing to the bottom line much later, once production is running smoothly.
Which must put pressure on presenting the long-term value compellingly in that business case.
Oh, absolutely. You have to make that future benefit feel real.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for anyone involved in projects, I think. The business case also requires considering project constraints. This is often where the rubber meets the road, isn't it?
It absolutely is. This is the tough part. The source focuses on the triple constraints: time, cost, and scope or quality.
The classic triangle.
That's the one. And these three are almost always battling each other. They're in tension, which is why a project manager's job involves constant balancing acts and, well, trade-offs.
The source gives some classic examples. If you have a time-critical project, like hosting a major sporting event.
Yeah, the Olympics or something.
Right. There's absolutely no flexibility on the deadline. The opening ceremony is happening, ready or not.
Exactly. So if things are taking too long, you might have to spend more money, maybe overtime, more resources to speed things up.
Yeah.
Or you might have to reduce what's included in the event, cut the scope to stay on schedule. Fewer bells and whistles, maybe.
Okay. Or flip it. What if it's cost critical?
Like maybe a public sector project with a fixed grant amount. That budget is firm.
Can't go over.
Nope. So if costs start creeping up, you're forced to cut back on the scope, deliver less.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe limit resources like overtime, which of course can easily lead to delays. Push out the timeline.
So you trade time for cost.
Often, yeah. And going back to our manufacturing example, if the crucial requirement is delivering a specific quality of that component,
making it scope quality critical.
Right. Then the project manager has to ensure that quality is met, period, while still trying to stay within budget and on schedule.
It sounds like these constraints force difficult decisions right from the start. You have to prioritize.
They absolutely do. You can't usually maximize all three. And finally, even in this early business case phase, you need a high-level risk assessment.
Even before detailed planning.
Yeah. You haven't done the deep dive planning yet, so you can't know every single potential hiccup.
Sure.
But you need to think about the big picture roadblocks. What could seriously go wrong?
Okay, so what does that involve?
You identify potential risks that could derail achieving the project objectives. They're then evaluated by their potential impact, often back on those very same triple constraints: time, cost, scope, and how likely they are to occur. Is it a high chance or a long shot?
And this early assessment helps prioritize the biggest threats.
Exactly. And you start thinking even broadly about how you might avoid or, mitigate them down the line. Plan B, basically.
So the culmination of all this rigorous work, the situation, options, feasibility, acceptability, constraints, risks, all wrapped up in the business case, is presenting it to the decision makers, including the project sponsor, for that all-important approval, that green light.
That's the goal of this phase, yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Once that why is locked down, the justification is solid, what's the next critical step according to our source? Is there another document that formalizes things?
Yes, absolutely. That's when the project initiation document, or PID, is prepared.
PID.
Yeah, right. And the source calls it an effective contract, which I think is a really great way to capture its role.
A contract. Between whom?
Between the project team and the project sponsor.
Got it.
And while it might be refined slightly later on, maybe tweaked as things evolve, this initial PID is absolutely essential because it provides the project manager with a clear mandate and defines exactly what's required. It sets the ground rules.
So what kind of details are in this contract? What does it spell out?
Well, it includes the project objectives, the high-level goals, and it summarizes the key information from the approved business case. So that's carried forward.
Okay, connects back.
Yeah. But crucially, this is where you get detail on the project deliverables.
Deliverables. Now, are those the same as the objectives or different?
They're more specific. Think of them as more tangible than just the broad objectives. Deliverables are all the specific outputs the project is expected to produce to achieve those objectives.
The actual stuff the project makes or provides.
Exactly. Thinking back to our manufacturing example, the deliverables wouldn't just be solve the supply chain issue, right? That's the objective.
Right.
The deliverables would be concrete items like the physical factory extension itself, the installed production equipment, any necessary software upgrades, trained staff ready to operate it all, communications sent to suppliers about the change, specific documentation produced throughout the project reports, plans, etc. All those tangible things.
Okay, that makes sense. the actual things the project creates or hands over. The PID also introduces something called gateways. What are those?
Gateways are basically formal review and sign-off points, checkpoints.
Like toll booths on the project highway?
Sort of, yeah. Think of them as required stops where the project cannot proceed to the next phase without explicit approval.
Approval from who?
From the sponsor and the project board. They're often linked to the completion of key deliverables or project phases.
Okay. Like the manufacturing example used in the source. Finishing the architect's plans for the extension might be a gateway.
Exactly. You can't start digging foundations or pouring concrete until the project board signs off on those architectural plans. It ensures alignment and control.
Makes sense. What else is in the PID?
It also outlines the project's chain of command, who reports to whom, and it clarifies responsibilities at each level.
So everyone knows their role.
Precisely. It even details the expected time commitment from the project team. Is someone needed full-time, part-time, or just for specific activities? It sets expectations.
Right. So with the business case approved, the PID drafted and signed off, and the manager and team in place, then the project is officially initiated and ready to roll.
That's pretty much it. The foundation is laid.
So we've got the documents, the why in the business case, the what in the PID. Now let's talk about the people.
Right. With the foundational documents defined, we turn to the human element, the key roles that actually bring the project to life.
Because documents don't manage themselves?
Not usually, no. And while structures can vary quite a bit between organizations, the source identifies a minimum set of roles that are pretty much essential for a project to function effectively.
Okay. Where do we start? At the top.
Yeah, let's start at the top with the project board.
The board. What's their job?
The board operates at the strategic level. Their primary concern is ensuring the project remains aligned with the organization's overall strategic goals.
Keeping the big picture in view.
Exactly. And making sure that the initial business case remains valid throughout the project lifecycle. Things change, so they check if it still makes sense.
Yep.
They are the ultimate decision makers, really. They sign off at major gateways, like we talked about, and handle issues that are outside the defined authority of the sponsor or the project manager. The big stuff lands here.
Got it. So below the board, you have the project sponsor.
This is the senior level champion for the project, often quite visible.
The champion. What does that mean in practice?
Well, they're typically responsible for securing the project's funding.
Important.
Very. And advocating for it within the organization, kind of clearing the path politically sometimes. They often negotiate the initial resources and constraints that end up in the business case.
So they're quite powerful.
Yes. They have significant decision-making power. They sit just below the board, handling issues too big for the project manager, but within limits set by the board itself.
Okay.
But what's crucial here, and the source emphasizes this, is that the sponsor monitors progress and offers high-level guidance. But they are specifically not involved in the day-to-day management. They delegate that. They provide oversight, not operational control.
Right. And that day-to-day responsibility falls squarely on the project manager.
That's the role. This is the person with overall accountability for the project's daily execution and critically managing the team.
So the hands-on leader, what does their work involve?
A lot. They create, implement, and control the project plans. They allocate resources, oversee activities to ensure all those defined deliverables actually get produced.
And they're making it happen.
They really are.
Yeah.
And this involves constant attention back to those triple constraints we discussed, tracking the budget, monitoring progress against the schedule.
Using tools like Gantt charts, maybe?
Often, yeah. Tools like Gantt charts to compare actual versus planned time, ensuring quality standards are met, managing any changes requested to the scope. That's a big one.
Scope creep.
The eternal battle. They also handle all project communication, manage problems and risks as they pop up day to day, and ensure project administration runs smoothly. Things like document version control, although some admin tasks might be delegated.
Sounds like a juggling act.
It absolutely can be. And finally, rounding out the core team are the individuals who actually do the work, the project team.
The people on the ground.
Yep. Their responsibility is pretty clear. Contribute to the project's objectives and deliverables. How? By performing their assigned tasks to the required standard and within the allocated time frame, they execute the plan.
It really sounds like the success hinges on the partnership between the strategic oversight of the sponsor and board and the operational execution by the manager and team. They have very distinct responsibilities, but they have to work hand in hand, don't they?
That collaboration is absolutely critical. You can't have one without the other functioning well. When those roles are clear and people work well together, it lays a really strong foundation.
So we've taken this deep dive into the crucial initiation phase of a project, drawing directly from the source material we had.
We covered quite a bit.
We started with the vital function of the business case, which provides the essential why, the justification for the project to even exist. And we explored its core components, from understanding the current situation to that early risk assessment.
Then we saw how that justification gets formalized in the project initiation document, the PID. That serves as the what's, detailing objectives, summarizing the case, and critically defining those specific, tangible deliverables.
Right, the actual outputs.
And the gateways needed for formal sign-off as the project progresses, those checkpoints.
And we finished by looking at the key players, the here and element, from the strategic oversight of the board and sponsor down to the operational management of the project manager and the vital execution by the team.
Understanding their distinct but very interconnected responsibilities.
Exactly.
And, the source concludes by emphasizing something important. While various tools and models exist for managing projects, software, methodologies, etc.
Yeah, lots of those.
Success fundamentally relies on having a robust business case and PID, and on the careful selection of the right people for those key roles, especially the project sponsor and project manager.
The documents and the people. Foundational.
Absolutely. Get those right, and you've got a much better chance.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider, straight from the material we explored today. If the business case is the project's foundation, its fundamental reason for being, and the sponsor and manager are its core architects, how much of a project's ultimate outcome, its success or failure, is already determined before the first task is even completed?
Something to chew on. How much is baked in right from the start?